Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I'm here with Austin Russell from MailChimp, Austin's social media manager with MailChimp. Austin, it's so great to be with you here today.
Yeah, thanks again for having me on. Excited to talk about our company and all things social media.
That's fabulous. So why don't we start right there? Austin, can you just tell us a little bit about your role as social media manager and a little bit about MailChimp?
Sure. So I guess let's start with MailChimp a little bit. We are an organization that was started in Atlanta. Um, we are a pretty large organization, still have our roots in Atlanta. We've got offices all over the United States and even in some other places across the globe. We are formerly kind of an email marketing company, and that's what a lot of people are probably more familiar with us about. More familiar with us, but over time, we've really evolved our business to become more of an all-in-one marketing solution
Hmm.
for people that are looking to grow or start their own small business potentially. And
Yeah.
so, my team specifically, we are a small and mighty team of two, which is crazy to think about. But what we do is we work across the organization, across a lot of our different business verticals. So, think of a vertical being like product marketing, and
Hmm.
we work with them to identify opportunities that they have throughout the year to leverage our social footprint in order to promote their priority messages. So that could
Hmm.
be a new product launching, that could be positioning an existing set of products that we have, that could be important because of a particular time of the year that we are in, maybe because it's beginning of the year, and people are typically excited to take on new ventures. So maybe we'll work with them on a campaign that positions some of our kind of entry products for customers as a way for them to kind
Yeah.
of become more acclimated
Hmm.
to our products. So it's pretty cool. We get to work with lots of different people at varying levels and various roles.
Hmm.
And yeah, I've been there for about 2 years.
That's great. That's excellent. It's really great to hear a bit of background there. So, Austin, we're going to talk a little bit about social media strategy here today. So, if I were to ask you, what are some core elements of strategic social media marketing? How would you answer a question like that?
Yeah, so I think um, one of the things that's really important for strategic social marketing, and this is something that we have really even revisited with ourselves a bit this year, is
Mm.
before you kind of get into the weeds of what content do you want to create for people and what channels does it need to be on, ultimately you need to kind of take that step back and figure out what is most valuable to your customers.
Mm.
What are they like asking for you as an organization or asking from you? How can you help them? And that could be existing customers. It could be even people in the marketplace that you're looking to potentially attract and bring in as customers.
Yeah.
But I think the first thing from a strategic standpoint is really taking that step back and figuring out what type of values are you looking to bring to your customers, and that then
Mm.
can help align from a content standpoint. How do you want to communicate those values across
Yeah.
the various social media channels maybe that you're activating on?
So, can you give me an example of like a value that MailChimp would maybe base a campaign on or even a simple post?
Yeah, so like we've got a couple, but I would say the two, let's say two maybe that are really interesting for us is this
Hmm.
idea of creating content to create this value or feeling of a community. And
Mm.
so for us, our customers in a lot of ways are small businesses and entrepreneurs, and especially even during the time frame that we've been in. As a business and even as just people, a lot of people are going through those experiences by themselves, and so for us,
Mm.
what we strive to do in our content across some of our key channels is make sure that when someone is landing on our profiles and maybe seeing an aggregate of our content or even engaging with one of our pieces in a very one-to-one moment, that we are creating an environment that feels like that they are going through their experience um, through in a similar fashion that maybe other people are going through. So an example might be an example of
Yeah.
content for that kind of value might be that we are doing a profile on one of our customers and we're talking to them about like why did they start their business, or what was that key kind of pivotal moment that made them change their career. Those
Mm.
types of conversations, I think, are really inviting for a lot of people because it makes it feel
Yeah.
like it's very relatable in nature. And so for us, it really does drive home this
Right.
idea of like creating a community sense where, you can kind of see that this other person is experiencing maybe similar things. You can, maybe drop a question or comment in as a part of that conversation that we're having with you. And so it's kind of like um, it's a rallying point for people to kind of feel like they're going through
Mm.
these things together. Another value, just to quickly kind of highlight another one, is
Yeah.
this idea of like creating content as a window, meaning like how do we create content to shed a light more on the industries that we're in or the industries that our businesses within, so that it can be used as like an educational point for people to kind of better understand how to
Mm.
navigate the world of creating a business or starting a business. It could also
Yeah.
be creating content to shed a light about our brand. Like how do we provide people a window into who we are as an organization, and
Right.
the things that we do to support customers behind the scenes. So
Yeah.
I think those are really two interesting values for us that we've really started to think
Mm.
about a lot more, and figure out ways that we can invest more of our time and effort because ultimately they're going to be valuable to our customers.
Yeah. That's great, and I think that kind of leads me into the next question. I mean, we're talking about values here, and we kind of have this concept of value-based marketing where we're trying to always add value. And I think you've described a couple really important aspects of Mailchimp's social media strategy. So, why is it important then? Why is it important, I guess, ultimately to add value or have a value-driving perspective?
Well, I think, for us in our space, there's so much going on in terms of noise and what people have to
Mm.
experience day to day. And so
Yeah.
their time on these platforms is somewhat, limited for how much you can actually have of their time. Because as soon as
Mm.
you're, as soon as you've engaged with them, they could easily go somewhere else, either within the
Right.
platform or out of the platform. So making sure that we're ultimately driving value to them and addressing a feeling that they might have or a need that they have from a service standpoint, or whether that
Right.
be like questions or concerns, I think will ultimately help you build long-term relationships with them, so that over
Right.
time, as you are um, creating more and more content in these spaces, it feels like more natural to them for wanting to engage with you and actually
Right.
look at your content. If it feels like you're talking at them and not talking with them,
Mm-hmm.
it can feel very jarring in a lot of ways. And
Yeah.
I experience it myself. I'll go on, Instagram or Twitter, and you can tell when it feels like it's not very well thought out. And
Right.
over time, I'll either unfollow those people or I just won't even bother stopping on their stuff anymore. So for us,
Yeah.
value-based content, I think, especially as these channels grow in size and people, not only brands but creators and stuff, are fighting for people's attention, like it's going to be very important to make sure that you're actually providing value to people.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because when we look at, yeah, I mean, I think we all experience that where we're following an account and it's just ultimately not that good. And I guess what you're describing is sometimes the difference between an audience and a community, where an audience you're just speaking to and a community you're engaging with or having some type of conversation, right?
Yeah, yeah, and this is where we try to balance, um, I would say, like owned and paid in some ways. Like
Mm-hmm.
paid, and I have a wonderful counterpart within MailChimp who kind of helps manage a lot of the paid initiatives that we have. But a lot of times we typically worked very integrated in fashion so that we are addressing like the needs and the audiences that we're looking to speak to versus the needs and audiences that she's looking to speak to. So from a paid
Right.
perspective, she has very clear goals, and a lot of times it it is in some ways almost like they're talking at someone because they need to make
Right.
sure that they're addressing still needs. Like it is still very like value based, and that like we are making sure that we're messaging people in a particular
Mm.
audience that potentially needs our services, but it's not supposed to be conversational and community based at all. Like, and that's where
Right.
we kind of come in and play that nice kind of role that counterbalances what they're doing. And as people are coming onto the platform and even probably following our accounts, they can come to our channels to kind of feel that community aspect and maybe
Mm.
learn across other people on the channel, for the stories that we're trying to tell or the tips that we're trying to give. So it is a unique balance that we try to serve both areas just
Right.
through different tactics.
That's good. That's really helpful. So, when we're developing a strategy, what are some of the main decisions that you use, or what are the main areas that you focus on when you're actually developing a strategy?
Yeah. So, we kind of talked about values a little bit, and I
Mm.
think that's definitely a good place to start. Um, One of the other things that we kind of do as a part of that is once we've identified a couple of our core values, and I would definitely encourage people to not overdo it in terms of values. Let's actually maybe talk about that for 2 seconds. Like
Yeah.
the idea here is that you want to have a couple that you feel really strongly about. The goal isn't to necessarily have like 6 or 7 or 8. The more you have, the harder it's going to be from the audience's
Right.
perspective to kind of understand ultimately how you're helping them. So if you feel like you've got a couple that are really strong, that is a much safer place to play and then trying to hit home on a whole bunch. So
Yeah.
starting with values and then really kind of understanding your footprint, your social media footprint. How are people using those channels? Not necessarily just for your brand, but from a consumption habit. Like, what are
Mm.
they using it for? What type of content are they looking for? So, like a perfect example for that is when we were doing our value kind of over, reviewing our values, one of the channels that we looked to apply our values against was Pinterest. And so what we kind of understood with Pinterest is it's very search based. So the nice thing is you've got a lot of data that we worked with the people at Pinterest to kind of identify, which was what types of search behavior is going on in the platform within
Right.
our, not only within our brand, but within the entrepreneurial space or a small business space. And so what we
Mm-hmm.
found was that some of the values that we had maybe didn't necessarily fit all on Pinterest. Maybe it was
Right.
only a couple of our values because based on the queries that were going on, they were clearly only looking for specific types of things. So the
Yeah.
idea here is that like you don't just take all your values and then put them all in the same channels. I would
Yeah.
really kind of understand the
Interesting.
uses of the channels, how how are people digesting content on there, how are people navigating and searching for content,
Mm.
and then based on that, outline which values you think can really drive home on some of those channels.
Yeah.
And then once you've kind of done that, the other thing you're going to need to do is, and we haven't really talked a lot about it, but it is super important, is like how are you going to measure success on
Yeah.
some of these channels, especially they're all unfortunately unique in their own ways. There are some KPIs that are somewhat consistent across them, but
Mm-hmm.
putting together a measurement plan is, I think, a really, really crucial step that sometimes people skip and really don't think about doing until they're looking at the data.
Right.
But really understanding, yes, you've got your values, and that's the things you're going to communicate through your messaging and your creative. But what types of measurable things are you trying to drive for your business?
Mm-hmm.
Whether that be more upper funnel awareness kind of metrics, is it driving new customers to the website? And so you're going to need to monitor some data through Google Analytics. But whatever those goals happen to be, maybe it's conversion and you're trying to drive sales,
Mm,
whatever those end up being, really identifying the key measurable points across the channels and
yeah.
outlining them in a measurement plan,
Hmm.
with potentially benchmarking if it's something that you have some data around historically. I think will
Hmm.
set you up for success down the road so that when you're doing maybe quarterly reviews of some of those things, you can really figure out where are you moving the needle in certain
Right.
parts? Are certain channels helping you move the needle in certain
Hmm.
areas? It's something that I feel like has been really useful for us, especially as we review data month to month. Having that measurement plan and having those benchmarks, it really makes having conversations with teams that we support, like, are things working? Are they not working? It makes it a lot easier.
Yeah.
Um, and then the last thing, and this is, I would say, kind of like the measurement plan, is sometimes a forgotten piece of success for social media is, and it depends on how large your team is and if you can support it or can't, but like having a community management strategy, I think is really, really vital, especially
Mm,
depending on what type of organization you're in. I mean, we are a service based
hmm.
company in a lot of ways. We offer a service. And so, we have lots of customers that are having interactions with us daily. Fortunately, our team works with a care team who kind of helps navigate a lot of those waters. But
Hmm.
having kind of the groundwork for how are you going to manage those one-to-one interactions? What are the talking points that you want to make sure are clearly conveyed when you're having those interactions? Where do
Yeah.
you need to send people to, depending on their areas of help that they need?
Yeah.
So having and then even like, what do you do if maybe something escalates to a point where it's beyond just sending them a resource article. It requires maybe more hands-on of an approach. So
Yeah.
having a community management strategy where you kind of are identifying the levels of types of conversations that you're going to have is really,
Hmm.
really important, because it not only helps you address the customers that you have day to day that need your help, but it also enables you to think about what are the types of conversations that you want to have before they even reach out to you about the problems that they're maybe having, whether it be about your
Right.
product or with billing, but maybe about the more like proactive conversations that you as a brand want to enter
Yeah.
into people's conversations when they're exploring products, and maybe they're
Right.
trying to figure out, like, do I want to go with MailChimp or do I want to go with this other product? Or
Yeah.
so having that plan really will enable you to open the door to have a lot of those conversations early on
Yeah.
so that you can build relationships with customers. So
Right.
those are kind of like the big areas that I would challenge people to focus on,
Hmm.
when they're kind of thinking through a strategy for their organization, no matter how big or small they are.
Yeah. That's great, and I think it's excellent to kind of just acknowledge that, like, these are like KPIs are not just for big businesses. This is not just a corporate thing,
Yeah.
but this is something that all social media managers or all marketers really need to look at. And I guess one of the great things about social media versus like putting an ad in a magazine or
Yeah.
whatever mass media channel you might use is that you can really measure some of these things and actually
Mhm.
get data, and having those KPIs in there are so important for us to really understand, are we being successful in what we're hoping to do?
Yeah. And, one of the things that sometimes gets lost is there's there's lots that you could measure within the platforms themselves, and those that is a great space to kind of understand the performance of the particular channel and
Hmm.
then the content in which you're publishing on those channels. But I would also encourage people
Hmm.
to think through the measurement and the performance of not only those places, but what it's doing in terms of your website as well. If you have
Right.
a website, let's say. But so like what we try to do is we have a web ops team, or a web like an analytics team here at MailChimp. And so one of the big things that I always try to look for is, yes, we can tell, for this campaign, let's say, like the performance for the channels that we implemented as a part of the campaign are doing well, and the content on those channels seems to be doing well. But what are people
Mm-hmm.
doing from those pieces when they visit our website? Like, are they actually,
Right.
especially if we're pushing people to the website to take a very specific action, are
Yeah.
they actually spending time on the website? Are they going somewhere
Yeah.
else and maybe digesting even more content? Are they landing there and like immediately leaving? I think
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we're a little bit so focused on just like, am I doing my job over here? And maybe not
Yeah.
looking at like, am I doing my job everywhere? That you can lose sight of some insights that could actually help craft adjustments down the road about some of the stuff that maybe you're doing from a .com standpoint.
Yeah. Yeah.
So really, really like whether it's you yourself doing it or if you've got a team or someone on like another individual that is managing it, but really kind of understanding some of what you are measuring and tracking from a .com standpoint can
Mm-hmm.
also be really helpful in also understanding the value that
Right.
social media is bringing for your business.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's a really helpful point because yeah, it really is kind of an integrated approach here that we're looking at. So,
Yeah.
Austin, I found this conversation to be really helpful and insightful. Thanks so much for being with us here today and just kind of chatting through some of these things when we try to understand, social media strategy at a deeper level. It's been great chatting with you.
Yeah, no, this has been great. I always, again, love talking about this kind of stuff and meeting people that enjoy it as well. So thank you again for having me on.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Sure. Have a good one.